Laudetur Jesus Christus. Vatican and World News.
In the headlines this Friday, January the 15th, the discovery of 2 new coronavirus variants in Brazil leads to new closures and a new instability. A powerful earthquake on Indonesia's Sulawesi island leaves scores of people dead and missing. And the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees expresses concern for the humanitarian situation in Ethiopia's Tigray region, where fighting sporadically continues. In the Vatican, I'm Linda Bordoni. 2 new coronavirus variants have been discovered in Brazil, leading the United Kingdom to close off transport links with large parts of South America. One mutation of the virus that causes COVID-19 was found in travellers to Japan from Brazil's Amazonas state. The news comes as a severe oxygen shortage afflicts hospitals in Manaus, the state's capital city, and as Catholic institutions report a worrying rise in cases in the Amazon basin. Devin Watkins has more.
The Pan-Amazonian Ecclesial Network, or REPAM, has released its most recent report on the spread of COVID-19 in the Amazon basin. Some 40,320 people have died with the coronavirus in the area, which spans 9 South American nations. Brazil's northern city of Manaus is the worst-hit area, with nearly 4,000 reported deaths. Health officials are warning that hospitals in Manaus are at risk of buckling. They say many people could die as medical personnel struggle to deal with a surge in coronavirus cases. Officials in the northern Amazonas state say oxygen supplies are running dangerously low and have even appealed to the U.S. to send military transport planes with oxygen cylinders. They add that intensive care wards are overflowing and that patients are being airlifted to other states. Reports have emerged of hospital staff trying to keep patients alive through manual ventilation. Meanwhile, researchers have discovered 2 new variants of the coronavirus that causes COVID-19. Several travelers to Japan from Brazil's Amazonas state were recently found to have been infected with one mutated form. Researchers from the Oswaldo Cruz Amazonia Foundation say it likely emerged in northern Brazil between December and January. The variant features 12 mutations, which include one similar to other variants in Britain and South Africa and linked to higher infection rates. Yet the surge in cases in Manaus may not be linked directly to the new coronavirus variants. Yarabas Barbosa, an official at the Pan American Health Organization, says the surge is affecting various cities and states and is more likely related to increased summer travels and close contact. Britain, however, has banned arrivals from South America, Portugal, and Cape Verde to keep the new variants at bay. However, one leading British virologist says one of the 2 is already circulating in the UK. Scientists say vaccines currently in production should work against these new Brazilian variants, but that further study is necessary to confirm that hypothesis. I'm Devin Watkins.
Meanwhile, a Catholic aid organisation is calling on the European Union to provide all people with fair and rapid access to vaccines against COVID-19. The appeal, launched by Miserere, comes after it was revealed that only 13% of the world's population has already secured half of the COVID-19 vaccines. Speaking to Vatican Radio, Pirmin Spiegel, the Director General of the Catholic Agency for Development Cooperation, noted that in the spirit of Pope Francis's most recent encyclical Fratelli Tutti, it is now more necessary than ever to show solidarity. Francesca Merlo tells us more.
There are studies showing that 13% of the world's population has secured about half of the COVID-19 vaccines. Pirmin Spiegel, the Director General of the Catholic Agencies for Development Cooperation, Miserere, noted that this figure is one that is causing experts to worry that achieving universal vaccination could take years unless wealthy nations are willing to invest more into it. Spiegel warns the world will only be able to deal with the COVID-19 crisis if we fight it everywhere, not just at home. It is now a matter of bringing the virus under control in all countries around the world as quickly as possible, the expert says. If this succeeds only in individual regions, the coronavirus has time to mutate, to change genetically, and can be fought even harder. And here you see, and it becomes very clear that inequality in our world is also mapped in the issue of access to vaccines, he says. That's why vaccines are a global public good. Therefore, there must be quotas from the entire world population to distribute them proportionately to the respective populations and to take into account levels of risk and vulnerability. Spiegel quotes experts as saying that nothing is gained if we as a society are protected by a vaccination, but that it loses its effectiveness because the virus mutates in another country and is brought back to us from there. As a consequence of this realization, Spiegel advocates for a temporary suspension of patents on the various vaccines so that they can be produced and purchased in a timely manner. The coronavirus situation is still very tense in many southern countries. He quotes the situation in Brazil, in Mexico, and in other countries such as Bolivia or Argentina, all lacking sufficient financial resources to purchase powerful and reliable vaccines. Some rich countries have already secured more vaccines than they need to supply their population, Spiegel says. In many countries in the south, however, people have to wait a long time before enough vaccines are available. Let's make sure that all people who want it can be vaccinated quickly, the Miserere leader urged. Finally, he said, in the spirit of universal brotherhood and solidarity, the poorest and most vulnerable need special attention, and we must not lose sight of other serious and growing crises in the south despite the pandemic: hunger, lack of access to healthcare, lack of educational opportunities, the consequences of climate change and gender injustice. I am Francesca Merlo.
At least 42 people were killed and hundreds injured in Indonesia when a powerful earthquake struck the island of Sulawesi just after midnight, toppling homes and buildings and triggering landslides. Thousands of frightened residents fled their homes for higher ground in the darkness when the 6.2 magnitude quake struck Indonesia's West Sulawesi province shortly before 1:30 a.m. in the morning. The U.S. Geological Survey located the epicenter some 36 kilometers south of Mamuju district at a depth of 18 kilometers. Robin Gomes reports.
Friday's quake and aftershocks in Indonesia's Sulawesi island injured hundreds and trapped many under the rubble, with authorities warning of more quakes that could trigger a tsunami. More than 300 homes and 2 hotels were damaged and a hospital was flattened, the office of the regional governor said. The tremors set off 3 landslides, disrupted electricity supplies and phone links, and damaged bridges linking to regional hubs such as the city of Makassar. The Indonesian Disaster Agency said the death toll could climb as rescuers retrieved bodies trapped under collapsed homes and buildings in Majene and in adjoining Mamuju district. The agency said about 15,000 people were being housed in temporary shelters. Indonesia's Meteorology and Geophysics Agency told reporters that there had been at least 26 aftershocks, with Friday's quake preceded by a quake of 5.9 magnitude on Thursday. President Joko Widodo offered condolences to the victims in a video statement, urging people to stay calm and authorities to step up search efforts. Key tasks for officials include restoring telecoms and bridge links and ensuring delivery of tents, food and medical supplies, said West Sulawesi provincial government spokesman Safaruddin. Aid distribution amid the coronavirus pandemic is likely to be a daunting task, said Jan Gelfand, head of the International Federation of Red Cross in the country. Indonesia recorded its biggest daily increase in coronavirus cases on Friday, with 12,818 new infections, taking the total to 882,418. 238 new deaths have taken the total to 25,484. Indonesia has the most coronavirus infections and fatalities in Southeast Asia. I am Robin Gomes.
The head of the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, has expressed concern over the humanitarian situation in the Tigray region of Ethiopia. The conflict between Ethiopia's government and the Tigray People's Liberation Front is fueling hardship in the northern region as sporadic fighting continues. Nathan Morley has more.
The High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi, said he was worried for the safety and health of Eritrean refugees in several camps that have been left without any aid for the last few months. He said there have been major violations of international law at 2 refugee camps in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region. Ethiopia has long given refuge to those fleeing conflict and persecution. UNHCR says repeated requests to access the Shimbela and the Hitsats refugee camps since November have still gone unanswered. Furthermore, UNHCR is continuing to receive what it says are many reliable reports and first-hand accounts of ongoing insecurity and allegations of grave and distressing human rights abuses such as killings, targeted abductions and forced return of refugees to Eritrea. Mr. Grandi said he impressed upon the Ethiopian leadership the urgency of ensuring the protection of refugees whilst preventing forced returns. Late last year, the Ethiopian government deployed the national army on an offensive against local troops in Tigray after accusing them of attacking federal troops. They promised to bring an end to the fighting in the region and remove its leadership, which the government regards as being illegal. For Vatican News, this is Nathan Morley reporting.
In the Netherlands, the government has stepped down after thousands of families were wrongly accused of child welfare fraud and told to pay money back. MPs of Mark Rutte's cabinet released a statement saying the families suffered an unparalleled wrong, with tax officials, politicians, judges and civil servants leaving them powerless. Many of those affected were from immigrant background and hundreds were plunged into financial difficulty. Rutte submitted the cabinet's resignation to the King. The unanimous decision taken at a cabinet meeting in The Hague comes as the Netherlands goes into lockdown and ministers have been considering stiffer measures to halt the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. And finally, a new report by the UN Environment Programme urges nations to step up their commitment to climate action in the face of rising temperatures and natural disasters. Lydia O'Kane has more.
Some progress has been made, but more is needed to protect economies and societies from the increasing impact of climate change. That's the warning contained in the 5th edition of the United Nations Environment Programme's Adaptation Gap Report, which was released on Thursday. UNEP Executive Director Inger Andersen stressed that in 2020, floods, droughts and storms had wrought havoc on the lives of 50 million people and wildfires devastated forests and communities amid a global pandemic. The only way to minimise these costs and damages is to race to adapt, she said. While we may be gathering pace, we are still losing this vital race. UN agencies have stressed that adaptation is required together with an increased effort to reduce climate heating emissions. According to the report, adaptation includes a number of key actions in order to keep people, buildings and the environment safe from climate extremes. These range from early warning of storms and heat waves to planting drought-resilient crops. The report highlighted what are known as nature-based solutions, which conserve and restore ecosystems such as forests and coastal reefs. The findings showed that annual adaptation costs in developing countries are estimated at $70 billion, but the figure could reach up to $300 billion in 2030 and $500 billion in 2050. It added that almost 3/4 of nations have some adaptation plans in place, but financing and implementation fall far short of what is needed. Stepping up public and private finance for adaptation is therefore urgently needed, the report stressed. The UNEP Executive Director urged governments, as they prepare initiatives to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, to spend stimulus cash prudently in order to make infrastructure and people more resilient against hastening climate change. As the coronavirus pandemic continues to spread around the world, the UNEP report warned the global outbreak had pushed adaptation to climate change down the political agenda. It noted that, in the long term, the economic downturn would put more pressure on government finances and could weaken resolve on climate action. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
And that's all for this edition of Vatican and World News. My thanks go to Joe Mauriello in studio. Join us tomorrow at the same time. In the Vatican, I'm Linda Bordoni. Bye-bye.